the movie has like a pretty good trajectory, and then it just still veers off in this whole other weird lane that almost every Marvel movie does for its like last 15-20 minutes. And I just kind of feel like we're never going to get past that. I mean, maybe Eternals will be drastically different. Maybe there'll just be a lot more scenes at Magic Hour, but... You said good. Hi everyone, I'm Dom Griffin. I'm a film critic and you're watching the Armchair Auteur. This is an ongoing video series I do where we talk about new movies, old movies, screenplay analysis, television series reviews, that sort of thing. So if you like movies and you like movie adjacent popular culture and you like to see somebody pick those things apart, then you are in the right place and you should consider subscribing. Today I'm reviewing The Eternals, the new movie from Marvel starring a bunch of big name actors playing a bunch of superheroes you've likely never heard of. I need to be really clear before going forward that I am a die-hard comic book person since I was a literal child, and I don't really care about the Eternals. I like Kirby's work, but I've never read his Eternal stuff. I've read Neil Gaiman's forgettable miniseries that was saved largely by some gorgeous John Romita Jr. art, and I've read and liked a little of the current Kieran Gillen Asad Ribic run, again, largely for the killer art, though major props to Gillen for trying to take a comics franchise not that many folks care about and make it relevant in time for the release of the new film. In the weeks leading up to this film, there has been a lot of discourse. So much online discourse about this movie. And I like a little bit of discourse, but not this much. Some mixture of the last few weeks on Twitter, there being a staunch sort of rabid popularity for the movie Dune and Dune's success, clashing up against the fact that there has been such an aggressive marketing campaign for Eternals, like just a lot of trailers, TV ads, all sorts of things like nonstop, means that like a certain segment of film Twitter is just over this movie. Like for the last several Fridays, it has felt like this movie is about to come out and it still hasn't. So it feels like the period leading up to the movie has been longer than normal, even if it has not. I'm not going to get into any of the specific topics, any of the specific sticking points, any of the specific arguments that have come up, but needless to say, almost all of it is insufferable. Almost all of it is kind of pointless. A lot of it's in bad faith, some of it's in okay faith, but I'm not going to really get into all of that stuff about the movie because, like, who cares? But I do say all that to say that going into this movie, the narrative behind the movie is the fact that this is the first MCU movie to ever get a rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes. Its review threshold has lowered beneath the point that it's considered rotten at the moment. It might plunge further, it might raise as more people actually get to see the film now that the movie's going to be out, but who knows? For right now, it's the first movie to ever have this happen to Marvel. Going into Eternals, I had very little excitement for the film, and I was convinced for the last good while that this would be the first abject MCU failure. The mixture of a filmmaker like Chloe Zhao fighting to keep her personal style intact within the Marvel machine, and the fact that it possesses maybe the least built-in audience of any Marvel film before it, just made me feel like it was gonna flop, even before the pandemic happened. But I'm not here to speak to the film's potential grosses. I'm here to talk about the film's quality. It's both nowhere near as bad as the Rotten Tomatoes discourse would have you believe, and also nowhere near as exemplary as the rabid fanbase's dogmatic defenses online may have warranted. It's, let's say, interesting. The movie has a sprawling cast of interstellar beings who have been living on Earth for 7,000 years. Let's see if I can remember all of them. Okay, there's Icarus, Circe, Ajax, Phaistos, Kingo, Druig, I want to say Makari, but I almost said Arrakis, that's not a good sign. Athena, Gilgamesh, and is that all of them? Did I get all of them?
Flawless victory.
But the gist is the Eternals came from far away at the behest of Arishem, a celestial, to protect Earth from deviants, these big Cloverfield-looking fucks who have been running loose. Their central conflict is needing to protect humans from the deviants, but not interfering too much with their actual development as a species. This means that Phaistos, played by Brian Tyree Henry, can't just give them the steam engine too early, or the Druig, played by the dude from Killing of a Sacred Deer, can't just mind control them and stop them from having wars. But as the centuries rage on and the last deviant dies, they continue to stay on Earth, waiting for a sign to go back home to Olympia. In present day, they've been scattered to the winds, but the return of the deviants forces them to reunite and save the world. I know people are very touchy about spoilers. One big sticking point during Eternals discourse was that some reporter spoiled parts of the movie and people got mad. I will say that a few weeks ago I had the entire movie spoiled for me, like beat for beat, and I didn't remember any of that while I was watching it. The movie has a lot going on, and like I just forgot all those details because like they're not really that important. The parts of this movie that are good are not the plot. It is a 2.5 hour plus movie that feels longer than 3 hours, that has a sprawling ensemble ensemble cast, as I've already said, and everyone tries to give each of them some space, like some room, some arc, some moments to shine. It's a lot to get into one movie where you're being introduced to all these people for the first time. There's an eon-spanning romance between Icarus and Cersei, but Gemma Chan and Richard Madden don't feel particularly believable or compelling beyond both just being extremely hot. Kumail Nanjiani got super jacked and turned into a live-action Chad versus Virgin meme to literally play the same kind of comic relief he plays in every single other movie he's ever been in. He's fun, don't get me wrong, but he never takes his shirt off once, and I think at some point we should have a meaningful conversation about actors getting comically ripped to play superheroes whose powers aren't muscle-related. Sprite has the same arc as Kirsten Dunst in Interview with the Vampire, but really the only ones who stood out to me were Gilgamesh, played by Don Lee, and Thena, played by Angelina Jolie. They both steal the show and have a unique relationship within the film, even if it feels like both possess too much presence and star power to be playing throwaway Marvel characters at this point. Like, Angelina Jolie in particular should not be in this movie. Like, she very clearly has more megawatt star power than every single other person's movie combined put together, and she's just kind of like there in the background as like this sort of throwaway Wonder Woman ripoff type thing, and I thought that was a really strange decision. Like, I don't know why she's not just leading one of these damn movies. But to me, there's just a handful of interesting things about this movie I kind of want to talk about. In my review of No Man's Land, I said this about director Chloe Zhao. It reminds me the great tragedy of this movie is that she was shooting this while she was doing pre-production on The Eternals, the new MCU movie that she has directed, and, you know, like, kudos to her for landing this big job and probably making some good money, and hopefully writing her own ticket when it inevitably becomes a hit, but I cannot for the life of me fathom how her style is going to jive with one of these big, figgy monstrosities. But, you know, if it helps her secure a future making more movies like No Man's Land, more movies like The Rider, then yeah, I can tolerate her having Angelina Jolie in a fugly costume, like shooting rays at people or whatever. I must say that even though I found some of the films look to be visually muddled and kind of flat, Zhao, more than any other director in the MCU history except for maybe Shane Black, remains herself here. I firmly believe that they let her do whatever she wanted to do, even if some of what she seemed to want to do here doesn't really work.
This is even made of vibranium.
Fall collection. IKEA.
There was an earnestness to her work that legit at times in this movie reminded me of Zack Snyder's Justice League. And not just because many of the characters' powers make them appear more like a Squadron Supreme JLA ripoff than normal, or because much of the film's third act so closely resembles a key scene from that film, but because there's a lyricism to the images and to the film's tone that I genuinely admired. Some of my favorite moments in this movie are the ones where it feels like you're witnessing regular-ass people living in the world of the MCU with all the expectations that entails, but less of the humor the other films typify those moments with. There are, however, a fair amount of dumb jokes and attempts at, like, typical Whedon-speak Marvel banter that did not work for me at all. And the post-credit scenes for this movie that I will not spoil, obviously, just feel like jokes at this point. Like, at this point, the expansion of the Marvel Universe just feels like repetitive gags where it's just you're pointing at someone that you sort of know, and then fans go, "Ooh, oh my god," and like, and it's been that way for years. But in this particular film, it felt extra egregious because so much of the rest of the film feels different. Like, a lot of the parts of the movie that are tethered to the Marvel Universe, all the little like actual references and connections, save for like one lone scene involving Salma Hayek that makes the entire narrative sort of make sense. It all just feels tacked on at best. Like, I will say that this movie handles the fact that these characters have been around for a while and have not interacted with anybody yet much better than like Captain Marvel did as a prequel. It does that stuff a lot better. I'll give it that. And it does feel like a genuine reason for why we haven't met these people up until now. Like, I respect that. And Zhao's style means that even some of the lived-in moments where the Eternals feel like a dysfunctional family bickering at one another look like boring scenes of models glowering at one another around magic hour. And unfortunately, for every attempt at humor that didn't land with me, there are some parts that are genuinely funny, I'll give it that, but like for every part of the movie where I was like, oh, I'm supposed to laugh, but this doesn't make me laugh, there were moments that were very clearly not supposed to make me laugh, that were very obviously like dripping with pathos that made me want to burst out laughing. And I didn't want to be a dick, I didn't want to like laugh at like serious moments in the movie, but like there's a scene in the movie that you've seen people talking about on Twitter probably, if they've spoiled this for you already. I'm not trying to spoil the whole scene, but there's a scene involving Phaestos, played by Brian Tyree Henry, and Hiroshima, and it's supposed to be a serious scene, and it's just so fucking funny. It's like the funniest thing I've seen in a movie all year. I didn't feel anything at that moment. I just felt that they maybe bit off more than they could chew. Because this movie has a 100% typical comic book movie narrative. Like, the plot is that a bunch of superpowered beings have to stop the world from ending. There's like a ticking time clock and all that stuff. Like, it's very regular. It's very normal. And the nature of that very conflict are what sets it apart from other movies set in the Marvel Universe. Like, the general structure of this movie, outside of all the flashbacks to human history, isn't that inventive, and shades of the reversals and reveals have been present in other films. But the tenor of the conflicts and moral quandaries at the heart of this movie do feel more ambitious than anything else Marvel's have attempted to do in the past. Ambitious to a fault. I'm full stop not going to reveal any of the film's twists or plot intricacies because I know that kind of pisses people off, but suffice to say, the way information is revealed in this story makes a lot of things that happen in the third act of the story so much more annoying than they would be in an actual typical Marvel movie. Like, if this was something that was kind of a throwaway minor film and the end was like kind of typical shit you've seen before, like typical CGI fight stuff, I wouldn't care because I'd be like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, it's kind of how like Shang-Chi ended. I was like, all right, well, I guess that's it. But because it posits some interesting questions about existence and fate and our place in the cosmos that it doesn't explore in any useful or meaningful way, much of the final conflict felt indistinguishable from other, admittedly worse superhero movies. And that felt like a bummer given that the headier side of the material is the most interesting thing about it. Like, I didn't give a fuck about any of the people in this movie. I didn't like any of these characters enough to care what happens to them or where they went next. Except Gilgamesh.
6 feet tall and super strong.
Love me some Gilgamesh. But I did, for a change, actually care about some of the ideas the movie seemed to be toying with. That the movie ultimately culminates in one of the more stirring bits of grandeur I've seen in any superhero movie, like not even just Marvel, like just any superhero movie like ever. The fact that Zhao creates like this really cool moment and like this beautiful imagery that like really like stuck with me. I was like, this looks really cool. This is really epic. I like it. But that it follows a bunch of very typical shit I've seen before, and them just kind of setting aside a lot of really interesting like philosophical questions about the characters to get to this moment. It made it feel just kind of like, okay, maybe this is why no one should ask more of these movies. Maybe the more you ask of these movies, the very structure and the very vehicle of this type of movie is not meant to shoulder this weight. Like, in comics, I feel like superhero comics over the course of decades have been able to transcend the genre and tell really fascinating stories that happen to involve superheroes, and it's really cool. But these movies, what these movies have become for like popular culture, for the industry, for like, you know, the shareholders, I think maybe we're past the point of making movies be good too, like being good. And this, like, I think to do all of this and what it needs to keep this brand moving forward and what it needs to sell toys and all this different stuff, like, I don't know that you can actually do that stuff and then explore the ideas that this movie seems to want to explore, because it just feels like it doesn't. It feels like they're like, oh, this is really cool, let's talk about this stuff, and then it's like, nope, nothing to say about any of this stuff. Let's get out of here and get ready for plugging a bunch of sequels to stuff that I don't care about. Normally, I would say I want to see Zhao get a sequel where she can dig deeper into the characters and maybe have more room to play because she doesn't have to establish so much of this corner of the world, and she could like have more fun perhaps. But it's very clear to me that whatever direction these characters are going to go in next is probably going to hew very closely to whatever the larger mega arc of this phase is, and that there's not going to be as much room for more experimentation or anything. So I don't actually care if we get a sequel or not. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, but I don't care. Eternals at the end of the day is better than like 6, probably like 8 or so other Marvel movies in my mind. I'm not making like a whole ranking, but like I liked it more than several other Marvel movies, I'll admit that. And I can't be that mad at a filmmaker like Chloe Zhao for going into this world and trying to make something beautiful and unique within the parameters set for her. And I even get the vibe that she accomplished a lot of what she set out to do. I just don't think it works. I don't think that ultimately a lot of the stuff that it tries to wrestle with and it tries to engage with, it wasn't meaningful to me the way I wanted it to be. It really does feel like one of those movies that kind of culminates in a lot of like the power of love type shit, but not in a way that's as believable. Like, it's very clear that she tried to make something special with this movie. I'm just not so sure she succeeded. Those are my thoughts about the Eternals. Do I recommend it to people? You're probably going to see it anyway. I don't think you really come here to me reviewing a Marvel movie to see if I think you should see the Marvel movie or not. I think you're going to do it regardless. But I do think that people who are maybe going in worrying this is going to be like a terrible disaster, no, like there's definitely worse Marvel movies. I think this one's mostly fine. Oh, but also the people that maybe have reacted to some other takes you've seen online about it being like a game changer, like, no, it's not that either. It's a decent movie. There's some stuff in it that I really genuinely liked, but very little of it actually pays off, and there's a lot of stuff that I really hated that just made me laugh and not take it seriously. But somewhere in the middle, there's value to it, I would say. I think it's fine. I feel like it's the sort of movie that if I saw a second time, I might have better feelings about, or more intense feelings about, but I also have no interest in ever watching it again. And I feel like that speaks more volumes than anything else I could say. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe. Hit the little bell icon so you get notifications whenever I put out new videos. And if you have any thoughts about the movie or questions, or you want to debate anything about it or whatever, you can do so in the comments below. I love talking to you all. I love sharing ideas and stuff. We can have discourse here and not get heated or crazy, I hope. Please don't send me death threats because of a Marvel movie. Thanks. Thank you for watching. Hope everyone's doing well, staying safe, being good to yourselves and each other. I will see you all in the next video. Bye.